Hi, welcome back. Today we're going to be picking up with reading Tangerine by Edward Bloor. We're going to start on page 17, and I'm going to share my screen with you today so that you can follow along in this video. Okay, here we go. Saturday, August 19th. Later. Dad and Eric were gone all day. Our house never did burst into flames, but the thermometer on the patio, hanging there in the direct sun, did climb to over 100 degrees. A vicious thunderstorm hit in the late afternoon and knocked out our power for about 10 seconds. That was just long enough to make Mom and me have to go around the entire house resetting all of the alarm clocks, VCRs, computers, and stereos. After supper, I opened the garage door and walked my bike out toward the street. The air was hot and damp, but there was no smell of smoke. The wind was blowing west now, toward the Gulf of Mexico. You can actually see the wind here. It whips around full of white construction sand, the sand that covers the streets and the unsold lots, the same white sugar sand that whipped through our development in Houston and the one before that in Huntsville. I turned left and pedaled against the sand toward the front of the development. Our street is about half filled with houses now. The development has grown from the west side to the east side, and we're on the last street before the east wall. Every empty lot on our street has a sold sign on it, though, so Lake Windsor Downs will soon be complete. I stopped at the model homes area, 4 houses surrounded by the same white picket fence, and pulled off my glasses to clean them. Lake Windsor Downs offers 4 choices to home buyers, each named after a British royal family: the Lancaster, the York, the Stuart, and the Tudor. Mom absolutely loves that. I'm sure that's why we live here instead of in the estates at East Hampton, or the manors of Coventry, or the villas at Versailles. Mom will soon be describing people like this. They're the 2-story Lancaster with the teal trim, or they're the white Tudor with the red tile roof. I replaced my glasses and started off again, riding parallel to the high gray wall. I stopped for a few minutes to watch 2 guys unloading thick squares of muddy sod from a flatbed truck. They plopped the squares down over the white sugar sand like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. When they pulled away, a new white Stuart had a new green lawn around it. I pedaled up the iron gates. They opened onto a 2-lane entranceway with a cement island in the middle. There's a fancy little guardhouse on the island, like something the kings and queens in history would have built to keep out the serfs, or the vandals, or whoever. It isn't keeping anybody out now. It's empty inside, but I could see a dirty ashtray and a wastebasket. Just in It's empty inside, but I could see a dirty ashtray and a wastebasket full of soda cans. Just inside the entranceway is a big pond. Lake Windsor, I suppose. I started around it on my bike. It's a perfectly round blue lake with a border of grass between the water and the road. I thought I heard a splash in the water, but I couldn't see anything moving. I rode completely around the lake in 1 minute and then headed toward home. As soon as I turned onto our street, I saw a black Jeep Cherokee parked in our driveway. A heavyset man in shorts was talking to Mom. She was pointing at the top of our house and smiling. When I pulled up next to them, she was saying, "So naturally, I thought I'd see flames shooting out of the roof." The heavyset man turned toward me, nodding his head in sympathy. "Yeah, when that muck fire kicks up, it can be a real stinkaroo." "Hello, young man." "Hello, sir." "Paul," Mom said, "this is Mr. Costello. He's the president of the Homeowners Association. This is my son, Paul." I said, "Pleased to meet you." Mom added, "He lives in the brown and beige Tudor on the west side." I shook Mr. Costello's outstretched hand and said, "I was just up the lake, just now." "Is that right?" he smiled. "Did you see any of the koi?" "The what?" "The fish. Koi. Japanese carp. They look like giant goldfish." No, I thought I heard something, but I didn't see any fish." "You get up there real early in the morning and check out those koi. They're really something to see. We had them flown in from Atlanta, stocked the lake full of them." Mom asked, "The lake? Is that Lake Windsor?" Mr. Costello laughed. "I guess it is now. It's not an official lake, it's man-made. Any new development like this has to have a retention pond for storm runoff. We decided to make the lake a centerpiece, a showpiece for our community. We stocked it with the koi and added plenty of green space around it for strolling or even picnicking." He reached over and squeezed my elbow. "No fishing though, okay? Those koi are high-priced fish." Just then, Dad and Eric turned the corner and pulled into the driveway. As usual, when Eric appears, the attention switched from me to him. Dad and Mom started to tell Mr. Costello about what a great football player Eric is, but Mr. Costello was ready for them. He has a football-playing son of his own, and he hopped into his Jeep Cherokee to go get him. They all wound up in the great room near the fireplace. I sat on a stool near the kitchen. Mr. Costello's son is named Mike. Mike and his father talked about the football program at Lake Windsor High with a great deal of pride. Mr. Costello pointed out, "We've only had the program for 10 years, and we've already surpassed the program at Tangerine High. No big school football players are coming out of Tangerine High anymore. The Lake Windsor Seagulls are now the dominant team in 3 counties. They're rewriting all the county record books." Dad said, "What position do you play, Mike?" Mike Costello spoke very well, like one of those football guys who made United Way commercials. "Coach Warner and Dad and I made a decision last year. Coach had enough linemen, but he had no backup at quarterback. He's been working with me, and now I'm number 2 quarterback on the depth chart." Mike's father turned to Mom and explained, "That means he's the backup to Antoine Thomas." But no one in my family needs to be told what number 2 on the depth chart means. If Mom had chosen to, she could have explained to Mr. Costello what it really means. As backup quarterback, his son Mike would be handling the snaps and holding the ball for the place kicker, in this case, Eric Fisher, a place kicker who can hit with deadly accuracy from 50 yards. If Mom had chosen to, she could have explained to him that Mike Costello's backside would be featured in the local paper often as he held the ball for this new place kicking sensation, but she didn't. Mike was very friendly. He told Eric that he had heard about him already from the coach and that he was looking forward to working with him. Eric smiled and said, "So, Coach Warner told you that you'll be my holder?" Mike answered, "Coach wants me in there as the holder so we can have the option. Either we can kick the ball or we can fake the kick and have me roll out and run or pass." Eric was still smiling, but he said, "Coach Warner knows what I can do. He can send anybody out there to pretend to kick a field goal. When I go out there, it'll be for real." Mike shrugged and said, "That'll be the coach's call, won't it?" Eric locked eyes with him for a second, then backed up. "Yes, of course it will." I thought to myself, "Way to go, Mike." But I had to admit, Eric was right. I've heard Coach Warner talk to Dad enough to know he's counting on Eric to be an impact player, a star. I guess part of that stardom will come at Mike's expense. I can see Mike Costello's future. I can see the Tangerine Times photos of the sensational senior place kicker Eric Fisher and his anonymous holder. Dad has the clippings from Houston of the sensational junior place kicker Eric Fisher and his anonymous holder, a kid whose name totally escapes me now. There will be no football glory in Mike Costello's future, but does Mike or his father really care? They certainly don't care the way Dad and Eric do. Dad told them that he graduated from Ohio State, but he added that he always regretted not being big enough to play football there. Mike's dad told us that he graduated from FSU and from FSU's School of Law. He didn't add that he regretted anything. Both Costellos seemed to be impressed by Eric. They both asked about his high school exploits back in Houston. They both admired the gold varsity ring on his hand. Dad boasted that Eric was the only sophomore in his high school to ever receive one. Eric was as phony as he needed to be. He asked some questions about Lake Windsor High's student government and about its National Honor Society. He asked about early acceptance programs at different universities in Florida. Mike told us that he had already been accepted into FSU's School of Engineering, so I don't think he's too worried about his future in football or in anything else. Actually, he seems a pretty decent guy for a football player, but who knows? He's bound to change in one way or another once he gets caught up inside the Eric Fisher football dream. Monday, August 21st. It took me a long time to fall asleep last night. I was thinking about this. Eric's arrival is going to change the football season at Lake Windsor High School. Dad's arrival is going to change how things are done in the civil engineering department in Tangerine County. Mom's arrival will change the homeowners association in Lake Windsor Downs. So what about me? Will I make the difference between winning and losing for the middle school soccer team? I have this sense that great things are expected of us here. Dad calls this a booming area, but it's no Houston. It's not even a Huntsville. It's like we're major leaguers who've been sent down to a minor league city for a while. We are expected to do great things here and then move back up to the big leagues. I got down to breakfast just as Dad was leaving. He was halfway out the door and he did not look happy. He was lecturing Mom. "You ought to file a complaint against that fireman. You ought to call the county and complain about the slow response time. Then you ought to complain about them sending some jerk kid out here who doesn't know what he's doing or what he's talking about." I don't know why, but immediately I rose to Wayne's defense. "He sure seemed to know what he was talking about, Dad. He sure knew all about the muck fire." Dad snapped back. "No professional shows up 20 minutes late wearing cutoffs. If he worked for me, he'd be fired." Then he was out the door, leaving me with my unanswered questions. Fired for what, Dad? For telling us the truth? For telling us something that you didn't know, that you should have known? After breakfast, I joined Mom in one of the guest bedrooms. We'd taken on the job of unpacking the boxes. We had already worked our way through the great room, the living room, and the dining room. Shade and storage space, Mom said, are the two things that you do not get in Florida. People pack up their northern homes with their attics and basements and tiny upstairs rooms that nobody ever uses, and they move into these Florida homes that are as wide open as cathedrals. All the house space down here is devoted to air and light, nothing to storage. Mom had, of course, anticipated this problem. Before the movers came, we had set aside everything that we would not use on a regular basis in Florida. All of these items were now stacked in a climate-controlled storage space just west of here, out on Route 22. We probably have as much stuff out there as we do here in the house, including most of Mom's antiques, which just aren't Florida. It occurred to me as we unpacked the things that are Florida that Mom might actually hate moving here. But of course she will never tell me about it, just like she would never have told Grandmom and Grandpop about hating any of those moves of her childhood. Mom would never waste her time complaining, just like she would never waste her time worrying about the past. Later in the afternoon, we drove up Route 89, past new developments with new walls and guardhouses, past a long row of high-tension wires to the adjoining campuses of Lake Windsor High School and Lake Windsor Middle School. All the way there, we seemed to be riding side by side with black storm clouds. I hope we get in before this rain starts, Mom muttered as we turned at Seagull Way into the enormous black-topped parking lot of the campus. We drove past the long, windowless two-story high school and around the football stadium to the middle school. The middle school office is located in a one-story building that looks like the younger brother of the high school building. We made it inside just as the first bolts of lightning cracked around us, while Mom gave my name to the secretary. While Mom gave my name to the secretary, I looked through a glass door at a field full of small, wooden shacks. They take up most of the space between this main building and the steel bleachers of the high school football stadium. I wonder who gets put into those shacks, I said, turning toward Mom. She was now standing with a tall, thin woman with jet black hair. The woman eyed me coldly and said all 7th and 8th graders are in the portable classrooms. The main building is for 6th graders only. Mom did not look pleased. The woman continued, I'm Mrs. Gates. I'm the principal here at Lake Windsor Middle School. Mom extended her hand. I'm Caroline Fisher. This is my son, Paul. Hello, Paul, she said. What can I tell you folks about Lake Windsor Middle? We were hoping to see exactly where Paul will be going next week. He has problems with his eyesight. He's legally blind. So we were hoping to make a dry run today. Mrs. Gates looked hard at my glasses. She seemed to be trying to think of a way out of this, but she finally said, I see. All right, let's take a quick tour. Mrs. Gates and Mom took off at a fast walk. I followed slowly, angry at Mom for calling attention to my eyesight. She wanted a tour of the place because she's nosy and wants to see everything for herself. It wasn't because I can't see, because I can. I can see just fine. We call this the building, Mrs. Gates explained. It contains the main office, the cafeteria, the library, and the 6th grade classrooms. Don't you have an auditorium? Mom asked. The cafeteria doubles as the auditorium. What about a gym? When we need to, we use the high school's gymnasium. But where do you have your PE classes? Oh, we always have physical education outdoors on one of our fields. And when it rains? Then we have it indoors, in the classrooms. Surely they don't do jumping jacks in those wooden portables. No, on a rainy day, the PE teachers will most likely concentrate on other parts of their curriculum, such as healthcare or good nutrition. We were outside now, facing the portables. There must be 40 of them, all connected by a system of wooden walkways, the kind of boardwalks you see at the beach. Only these stretch over some sick-looking grass and a lot of brown dirt. Mrs. Gates was speaking rapidly. Each portable is, of course, air-conditioned. As you can see, all of the buildings on our campus are grounded with lightning rods for our afternoon storms. Mom eyed the field with alarm. How would you ever know if there were some emergency out here? Mrs. Gates turned to her and asked, like what? I froze. Even I could hear the annoyance in that voice. Mom locked eyes with her. Does it really matter like what? Do I really have to provide you with an example of what constitutes an emergency? Mrs. Gates retreated. No, of course not. Each portable is connected to the main office by a telephone and a public address system, and each has its own pull alarm in case of a fire. We all stared at the crisscross of wooden walkways until Mrs. Gates asked, What brings your family to Tangerine? My husband's job. He's the new deputy director of civil engineering for the county. I see. Large drops of rain started to fall around us, so we headed back inside. Mom prompted me. Paul, do you have any questions? Yeah. Do you have a soccer team? We do. We have an excellent soccer program, a boys' team and a girls' team. We play against all the schools in this area. Are you a soccer fan? I'm a soccer player, I corrected. I play goalie. We were now back at the main office. Mrs. Gates led us through into her private office. Mrs. Fisher, I'd like to get you to fill out an IEP for Paul, an individualized education plan. Being vision impaired, Paul is entitled to take part in our IEP program. Basically, we identify Paul's situation, set specific goals for him to achieve, and note any special needs he might have. Mom started to read the form. I stepped outside to show that I wanted no part of that conversation. I spotted a glass trophy case and went to check it out. The biggest trophy was for last year's boys soccer team. It said, First Place, Tangerine County Sports Commission. Mom came out of the office briskly. We ran through the cold rain to the car. Once we were inside and belted up, she said, So, what do you think of Lake Windsor Middle School? I don't know, I mumbled, staring out the window. We drove back past the fields of portables, but Mom suddenly hit the brakes. Look at that, she cried. The field was now completely flooded like a rice paddy. The brown water had risen to within inches of the wooden walkways. We both shook our heads in disbelief. Then I decided to answer her question about the school. I guess if they have a decent soccer team, I'll let them slide about not having indoor classrooms and not having a gym. Yeah, Mom sputtered. Not having a gym or an auditorium, two more facts apparently overlooked by her father. And what am I supposed to do? Send you to school every day in rain gear? With an umbrella? Mom would never say it, but I bet we were thinking the same thing. What else has Dad overlooked about Tangerine? We drove on in silence, except for the pounding of the rain from the flooded campus of Lake Windsor Middle School to the flooded streets of Lake Windsor Downs. Wednesday, August 23rd. All four of us were back at the high school, middle school campus today. The head coach, Coach Warner, was holding a 3-day tryout camp for the football team before the start of the school year. Eric, of course, didn't need to try out, but he was there anyway. Dad had brought Eric to meet Coach Warner earlier in the summer. Dad had knelt down and held the ball for Eric to drill 50-yard field goals, one after another, while, according to Dad, the coach's jaw had dropped lower and lower. Now Dad and I were standing next to the coach. Not that either one of them was aware of me. I was watching a huge bird of prey circling overhead like a hawk, but it wasn't a hawk. I knew that. It was an osprey. I know the difference because of a science project I did last year. Could a vision-impaired person tell the difference? The players were doing calisthenics under a troubled-looking sky. As black clouds gathered in the west, Coach Warner explained to Dad, I've never had a good place kicker before, but I sure could have used one last season. We lost 4 games by a grand total of 7 points. Those days are over, Dad assured him. Antoine Thomas was the whole show last year. He was the go-to guy on every play. He ran for over 100 yards 8 times. That's pretty impressive. I even had him running back kicks, but I'm not going to do that this year. He's just gotten too valuable. If Eric can give us 5 or 6 points a game, then I can save Antoine for quarterbacking. Oh, Eric can give you that. He averaged 9 points a game last year, and he was only a junior. He scored 14 points in one game. That was the game when he kicked the 47-yard field goal. I remembered that game back in Houston. Eric was on the front page of the sports section the next day. I think it was the proudest day of Dad's life. Dad told Coach Warner, I remembered that game back in Houston. Eric was on the front page of the sports section the next day. I think it was the proudest day of Dad's life. Dad told Coach Warner the thing about Ohio State, how he regretted that he hadn't been big enough to play football there. Coach Warner nodded sympathetically, like he agreed this was some kind of tragedy in Dad's life. I don't understand that. Then again, I don't understand why Dad loves football. I've played football, real football, in the junior league. It's boring. You stand around most of the time waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. And in the end, some guy like Eric, who hasn't even worked up a sweat, can come in and grab all the glory. It doesn't work that way in soccer. Eric used to play soccer. He was really good, too. This was back in Huntsville, when he was 9 and 10 years old. He took all the penalty kicks for his team. That's how he learned to kick so hard, drilling those penalty kicks into the back of the goal net. When we moved to Houston, when Eric was 11, he realized that football was the star attraction. He took to kicking at football, soccer style, into a small net that he had set up in our backyard. Day after day, in rain and cold and heat, Eric worked on perfecting a 2-step kick. Up until then, Dad wasn't much into sports. Once Eric started getting good, though, Dad became transformed. He started talking about his high school football career and, of course, his regrets about college. He became obsessed with football, especially with place kicking. He learned how to hold the ball for Eric, spinning the laces away. For a while, he tried to get me to hike the ball to them, but I never really cooperated, and they soon dropped me from the routine. We watched the Lake Windsor players break into groups for timed sprints. Mom came up and stood with us for a minute. I knew she was really there to tell me to get in the car because a thunderstorm was coming. She said, "A storm's coming," to Coach Warner, but he just smiled and agreed with her. "Sure is." Mom pointed out some people to me. There was Mike Costello, and there were his father and his brother standing on the other sideline. There was Arthur Bauer, the guy Eric had over to the house yesterday. There was Antoine Thomas, the quarterback. Mom quickly grew impatient to get me to the car. On the way to the parking lot, she said, "Those boys shouldn't be out there in a thunderstorm. They have to play in all kinds of weather, Mom. Sometimes you get caught in a blizzard. Sometimes you get caught in the rain. It's part of football. It's part of soccer, too. Why can't they practice in the morning when it doesn't rain? This is ridiculous. When you know that it's definitely going to rain at exactly the same time every day, you can't really call it getting caught in the rain, can you?" I had to agree. "I guess you're right. It's like the afternoon tree watering time around here, but there aren't any trees anymore." We climbed inside the car just as the first big drops of rain rapped against the roof. "Look at your father. What is he doing out there?" "I don't know. He's just going to stand there and get soaked?" "Looks like it. This isn't Texas. They have their own weather in Florida, and we all need to change our attitudes about it. People shouldn't stand outside in this kind of rain. Just listen to that." The rain was beating down so loud now that it was hard to hear Mom's voice. I sat thinking for a minute and then hollered, "I'll bet the people who used to live here, the people who grew the tangerines, were really happy with this weather. That's why they were here, right? To grow tangerines?" "Do you mean it's nice weather here if you're a duck?" "Yeah, or a tangerine, but now it's all upside down, you know? It's all messed up. The rain clouds show up every day, just like they're supposed to, but there aren't any tangerine trees, just people. And the people have no use for the rain clouds, so the clouds go around looking for all the tangerine trees. They can't find them, they get mad, and they start thundering and lightning and dumping the rain on us." I had the feeling Mom knew what I was talking about, but all she would say is, "Clouds don't get mad, Paul." We sat in the beating rain noise for a few minutes, then it abruptly stopped, like some annoying little kid had stopped banging on a pan. The sun came out, and the steaming heat rose up all around us. "Great," Mom muttered. "Now it's sauna time." "You need to lighten up, Mom." "Oh, is that right? You're the one getting attacked by disappointed rain clouds. Why don't you lighten up?" Mom looked in the rearview mirror and added, "Look, soccer players." I turned around and, sure enough, behind the field of portables was a small group heading toward the middle school soccer field. "That's Mike Costello's brother in front. His name's Joey." "Go ahead, Paul. Catch up to them. Teach them a few things." "Yeah, maybe I will." I hopped out and followed the group. There were 4 guys ahead of me kicking a ball around. I walked up and stood right in the goal. Joey Costello said something like, "Hey, how's it going?" and kicked one at me. Then the other 3 kids fanned out in a semicircle in front of the goal. I caught Joey's kick and rolled the ball out to the next guy so he could take a shot. I caught his kick, rolled it to the next guy, and so on. They weren't very good. None of them seemed to know how to kick. They didn't drive the ball with their insteps. They just stubbed it with their toes. I had no trouble stopping everything they kicked at me. I never did hear the names of the other guys, but when they got tired of playing, we walked back together toward the football field parking lot. Joey said, "Are you coming out for the Lake Windsor team?" "Oh yeah, I'll be there." "You gonna play goalie?" "Yeah, how about you?" "Fullback, I guess. I played some goalie last year, but I never got into a game." "When are tryouts?" "I don't know." Joey turned toward the other guys. "When are tryouts? Anybody heard?" Everybody shook their heads or said no. Joey said, "Listen to the morning announcements. They'll tell you when." "All right," I said. "I'll catch you guys later." The 4 of them continued toward the other side of the field, still stubbing the ball along the ground ahead of them. I saw that Mom and Dad were waiting at the car, so I hustled over there. I said, "Where's Eric?" "He's getting a ride home with Arthur Bauer," Dad answered. "How did your soccer playing go?" Mom asked. "No sweat," I said. As we rode back, I thought about how easy it was and how easy it was going to be. If Joey was the best they could do for a goaltender, then I already had the job. I wondered if he had changed his mind about playing goal again after watching me today. I wouldn't doubt it. I wondered if he saw that a major leaguer was here to play a season or 2 in the minors. Okay, that's where we're going to stop for today. We'll pick up again in our next video.